What about that for a question? We've ended up with this halfway house. We've checked out, but we haven't left. If we stay there, is that going to keep everyone as happy as they can possibly be? Fraser Nelson joins us, editor of the Spectator, Telegraph columnist, has written about this today. And John Longworth is on the line from the pressure group Leave Means Leave, a former Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce. Fraser Nelson, to you first, and you're kind of reporting on this a lot at the moment, obviously. And you wrote a column saying we are heading towards the checkout but not leaving.
Yeah, that's right. And some of the most energetic leavers, take Michael Gove, for example. Even he is now thinking he could live with this. He'd see it as a staging post that, yeah, we'll agree this for now. Maybe we'll revise and improve it under a different Prime Minister. But it is a compromise that I think most Tory MPs could get behind. Because take your average voter who wanted to leave, they wanted out of the EU, you're going to get that. You're going to get huge reduction of EU payments from 10 billion down to 1 billion, so huge, massive reduction there. Control of the borders. Now, not many people were that excited about the prospect of tariffs and trade deals. Sure, for me it's an attraction, but for me it wasn't the reason that I personally supported Brexit. So I think...
But you can't have one without the other, can you? If we want to have EU preferential tariffs, we apparently have to accept free movement, so we've lost our borders. So... how do you put that together?
Well, because first of all, free movement is a red line. No British Prime Minister will agree to that. But you can have, for example, a compromise like we'll be in the single market for goods but not services. There are various ways of cooking it. There is a deal to be struck in this centre ground. The question is whether the EU can recognise that, or whether they're going to be so hardline they might push the Conservatives to something that the MPs might reject in preference to a no-deal hard Brexit.
John Longworth, why not go with what Fraser's describing, which is 1 foot in, 1 foot out?
Well, because it's snake oil. It's created absolute fury amongst people who actually believe in Brexit. This is Brexit in name only. If we remain aligned to the customs union, then we will have to actually comply with regulations. We'll have to have regulatory alignment, so the European Court of Justice will still have jurisdiction over vast areas of our everyday lives. We won't be able to strike trade deals around the world because, of course, we may be able to offer services, but they won't be able to offer goods back, which is what they will want to do to have a trade deal. So it defeats that objective. There is an assumption in the sort of London metropolitan bubble that people around the country only voted for Brexit because of migration. That's not my experience at all. People wanted sovereignty. They wanted to be able to remove tariffs because it's the poorest in the country that suffer from the excess prices that we have to pay as a consequence of the external tariffs that the EU insists that we apply. And, of course, there's the rebalancing of the economy towards manufacturing regions. What we're effectively saying is we'll abandon the West Country, we'll abandon Wales, we'll abandon the north of England. All those manufacturers can suffer as long as the City of London gets its services.
OK, but we then get to 2019 and we've got all those demands and they say no. We have to so-called crash out as a hard exit, don't we? We've got to have hard Brexit. Now, that is when we get all the so-called experts saying, oh, you're going to have to pay £5,000 a household for that.
Well, that's complete nonsense. I mean, it's Project Fear Mark II. The fact of the matter is that the government have wasted 2 years on these negotiations. Boris is absolutely right. They should have started from the position that we're going to go to a World Trade Organization deal and not actually try and satisfy the EU, and then actually offer the EU the possibility of a free trade arrangement if they wish to have it. We can still do this. This is what the government should do next. Absolutely. They should simply say, we are now going to a World Trade Organization deal. We're leaving in March 2019. There'll be no transition. We start making preparations from today for that to happen.
Okay.
And we're not paying the EU any money.
Right. Now, that sounds dramatic, but if we look back, Fraser, to the snap election, that's exactly what Theresa May was saying. If we don't get a deal, we'll go without one.
Yes, that was at a time where she still had some political authority, which pretty much vanished a year ago today.
So that's gone now, that hard Brexit option for her, you think?
Well, certainly I think it probably has. Boris Johnson doesn't. Boris still thinks there's still time to crash out and will, for example, not charge any tariffs, will have some transition option. But interestingly, other Brexiteers, not just Michael Gove but others, think that practically the civil service just couldn't cope in time. But that deal should have been on the table, but it isn't now. It isn't an option, and there's no point saying, "Oh, we should have been preparing for this 2 years ago." Yeah, we should have, but we didn't.
Well,
we are
just
where we are.
To interject, Fraser, the one thing we haven't mentioned yet, but which is really, really at the heart of this, is the Northern Ireland border. Now, we haven't worked out if there is a hard Brexit, Fraser, on a Monday. On Tuesday, what happens along that border? And that seems like the question that no one can answer.
Well, Boris Johnson had a go at answering this in his off-the-record comments on Wednesday. He was saying, look, the border is really small. There's hardly any companies that cross it. So we can come up with some arrangement we can make do and mend. So, he's quite relaxed about this. Others see this, and the EU has been very, very clever, I think, in presenting this border as being the sort of back door to get all of the rest of the EU negotiations. And the British government's made lots of mistakes saying no infrastructure there. No, the British could say, look, we won't build a border. The Europeans can if they want, but we're not going to. But we're just out of time. We're out of political capital. And you have to be realistic about what Theresa May, with her authority as low as it is really going to achieve.
So, John Longworth, it seems like we're headed to Hotel California. You won the referendum and lost the result.
Well, there is a danger that what Fraser's saying is going to prove to be correct, but there will be absolute fury in the country if that happens. And I would be surprised if the Conservative Party got into government again during the next generation. The fact of the matter is, we still have time to do this as long as we actually start to do it now. And the Prime Minister has to get a grip. Now, Fraser mentioned Michael Gove. Michael Gove was never a committed Brexiteer in the sense that I would have been. And the truth of the matter is that there is only one Brexit. There's no hard Brexit. These phrases have been invented by the media. There's no crashing out. We should just declare that we just leave. We just leave in March 2019. We can make the preparations that we need to do now. Businesses are very good at reacting very quickly to new situations, and they can actually prepare, provided we actually go for it now. And we should simply leave and say to the EU, you're not getting any money. You can actually have a trade deal if you wish, and believe me, in a nanosecond, they'll be at our door asking for an FTA because they will go bust if we don't give them the money.
What do we do on the Northern Ireland border, just out of interest on that?
Well, the Northern Ireland border issue is the tail wagging the dog. It's ridiculous that we should be being held to ransom on the Northern Ireland border.
So just leave it.
Actually deal with. We can actually just continue as we are at the moment with a free movement proposition as we have had under treaty with Ireland since the 1920s, and on the actual movement of goods, we can deal with that with technology. We can have a simple open border. Now, if the Irish and the EU were foolish enough to erect a border on their side, that's their lookout. But we can't have the tail wagging the dog here.
Thank you very much.
The UK must leave.
Thank you. John Longworth from the pressure group Leave Means Leave.